Good afternoon, church. If you have your Bibles with you, if you'll turn to Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18. How many of you enjoy a Sunday afternoon nap? I'm going to try my best to get through this before you start. Just a little bit of a house cleaning. We have a thought that started from Sharon Hammer of a library on a computer. And so Sharon and I said, well, it's impossible, but I kept working on it. And we now have something like that. It's an online library. It's my library. There's thousands and probably tens of thousands of books in this library. So whatever commentary or textual book, whatever you want, you'll be able to have access to it. It's on a laptop that we ask you don't remove from the church office. It's right in front of Morgan's desk. So if you get to her desk, the old computer's now been taken away. It's not hooked up. It's going to probably be packed away sometime or donated to somewhere. But it's on its way out, and her computer's password protected. And the reason is I got a request from her computer for my bank account saying my information had changed between our two computers. And the only way that could have happened is a virus had gotten onto it. So she's going to change her password again, and I won't have access to it. Nobody will. But we will all have a laptop. It can print to the printer. It is wireless. You can unplug it and take it anywhere in that office if somebody is already working at that terminal. And what we ask is that you remember the password and try your very best not to download soft viruses, which comes in the form of clip arts. You click on a link, and before you know what happened, it's attached. The clip art's good, but there's some other subtle things that you don't see that happens really quick, and it's pre-checked for you to download. I consider Norton antivirus software and McAfee antivirus software to be a virus, so we want to try not to download anything. But if you do, don't worry, we can get rid of it. The password is Matthew 25, all small letters, Matthew 25. And my account's there also. I'll eventually take my account completely off, but it will be defaulted to Summit. So all you have to do really is just open the lid, and you probably won't even need a password. It'll probably be there. Well, thank you for your patience on that as we improve our educational abilities and reach in this congregation. One other thing, if you have an email that's on the web, you can also print any documents for school, for Sunday school that you have directly to the printer. Looking at the concept of forgiveness that we touched on just a little bit, if you look at that graphic, why would that graphic represent forgiveness? Mark Twain one day said, unforgiveness is drinking poison and thinking the other person's going to die. You're drinking poison and you think somebody else is going to die. You are dying, and what forgiveness does is it breaks us away from things that can literally kill us. Literally, because right there in that picture is Amber and Botham, Jean's brother. And I don't think anyone in the world hasn't seen that image. And what a moving image of Botham's brother. Botham, a faithful Christian, went to Harding School, graduated. I don't know how high he went up in that school, but he did finish. And he walks into his apartment one night in Dallas, and Amber is there. She thinks that's her apartment. And let's think. I don't know how exactly it happened, but they meet each other, and it's dark, and a shot rings out. Well, Botham's not there to forgive her, but his brother is. And what a moving scene to bring life into a situation that is so bad. So unless you forgive, look at the context of what we're looking at. We're starting from verse 15. Oftentimes when we look at this scripture, Matthew chapter 18, verse 15 through 20, we apply it to hundreds of different things. We apply it to conflict resolution. We apply it to the fact that if you come together, where two or more gathered together, then we can worship. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with forgiveness. Those 3 steps of conflict resolution are designed to bring forgiveness. And the reason I know that, the only reason I know that, is context is king. Context is king. And it's in this context that first off, you have Jesus saying, these are the 3 steps that you need to apply or take to have forgiveness, to have the optimal chance of forgiveness taking place. And then Peter says, Lord, let me check my math. Is 7 times enough? And Jesus says, no, 70 times 7 equals forgiveness. What a strange equation. But no sooner has Jesus talked about this than Peter's trying to worm his way out of it. Mankind forever, from Cain and Abel. No, before that, with their parents, were trying to worm their way out of the concept of forgiveness. And then Jesus says, let me tell you this parable. A guy owed 10,000 denarii, another one owed 100 denarii as opposed to 10,000 talents, which is a million times more, literally just about equally a million times more. And he brings it home for us really well. So we have explained, exemplified, and applied in this lesson. So first off, the explanation of forgiveness' perfect path. If you follow these steps, you have the best chance. Normally, we don't follow step 1 and 2. We go straight to step 3, and the person finds that they're in step 3, and the elders are facing them or whatever, or the boss is talking down to them, and they never had chance 1, chance 2. If you see somebody sinning, go to that person and to that person alone and try to bring resolution. That's what you're not trying to say, you did me wrong. I had something yesterday, it was like 8:30. Somebody's asking me to print tickets or certificates for an end of the year function for people who have helped with putting together a major fundraiser for the end of the year and a Christmas project. And so I'm roped into it late at night. And the person says, I'll create the certificates. The person says, put my name first and put this other person's next as a co-chair. And so I do it. About 5 minutes later, it says, can you swap those 2 names around as if I didn't see it to begin with? Didn't talk about it. I didn't see it. I just let it go, did it. Oh, perfect. Came back the answer. So you always want to see not, you did me wrong and now you're going to suffer. You want to make the problem go away as soon as possible, as quick as possible, as painlessly as possible. You don't want to string it out. And so that's what he says is the first, if he listens to you, you've gained your brother. That's the object. If he doesn't listen to you, take 2 or 3 witnesses with you. Let's establish the facts. Again, you try to get impartial witnesses because you're not trying to get the person in trouble. If you get all your buddies who are going to take your side, you're painting the person in the corner, and that person has got no chance of getting out of this. And that's not the object. But if he does not listen, take 1 or 2 others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, what happens if step 1 doesn't work, step 2 doesn't work? Go to step 3. What is step 3? Take it to the church. If he doesn't listen to the church, treat him as a sinner and a tax collector. So, in other words, this is the best chance. Now, this person knows. Kind of knows, maybe is prideful, but surely must know that they've done wrong. Sad as it may seem, some people will argue their way out of it in their head. They lie to themselves, and they still won't get it. But what happens if you take it to the church, and the church says, this is our stance on it, and the person still doesn't turn back? Now, look what's going to happen. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. This is serious, serious stuff. Again I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth, this is about forgiveness. This is not about worship. This is about forgiveness. If 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. This is the maximum method to bring reconciliation and to give the person a chance at some point in their life to see that they messed up. So what do I do if the Summit Church of Christ says to me, you've messed up, and my stubborn will doesn't yield, and I get all in a fuss or a tizzy, and I go to some other place down the road and I worship there. But this church has bound it. You know what I would do? I would come back here and I'd make nice. I probably would go back and worship somewhere else, but I will come back here because of that, because I know how serious that stuff is. And I hope you're all seeing it. Verse 20, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them. This is as authoritative as if Jesus himself was saying it, because this is the words of Jesus. We have found a lot of ways to solve conflict in our lives, a lot of different methods. One of the ways that we used to solve conflict is in the Wild West is we would stand so many yards apart and we would see who had the fastest draw. Before that it was with swords, and before that it was other different methods. But not too long ago it was dueling, but dueling with pistols. This man, Alexandria Dumas, was one of France's well-known and best-known novelists and playwrights, but he was also incredibly good with a pistol duel. I mean, he was so good that he would never, ever miss his mark. So he gets into an argument with a young politician, a little upstart guy. But this upstart guy, he doesn't know it yet, but he soon finds out that this guy is also just as good. He is just as good. In fact, they equal when it comes to dueling with pistols. And so they realize if they go and settle their argument their way, they're both going to turn around the same time, they're both going to shoot each other, and both will be dead. And so they think, you know what, that's a bit of a waste, because Dumas got this incredible career, and this politician is up and coming, he's going to have an incredible career. And so they decide they're going to flip a coin. And it falls on Dumas. And Dumas, sadly, and to the bewilderment of his friends, watch him leave his incredible career. He goes into a room, and they wait for that fateful shot. After the noise, the friends, the immediate close friends, go in, and there they find Dumas sitting straight up with this puzzled look on his face. He says, "You won't believe it. I can hardly believe it. The first time in my life I've missed." That politician was probably very happy. He probably learned a few tricks from this very wise man. But the point is, we don't solve problems using our methods. We might have a little joke with it, a little bit fun of it, but actually that wasn't really funny if you think about it from that politician's standpoint, because he probably would have gone through with it. Secondly, not only do we explain it, but we exemplify it. This is what it is. Now, let's test this. Peter, verse 21, then Peter came up and said to him, "Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him?" You see where the forgiveness comes into play? From verse 15, if your brother sins against you, he picks it up right here in verse 21. It's kind of like a Nicodemus. Here's the truth. He's puzzled. He says, "Well, how can I enter my mother's womb a second time?" And so you have to have it explained. But it doesn't just explain it, this exemplifies it. This brings it to a whole different level, and it takes all excuses out the way. Any excuse anybody's ever had for not forgiving somebody, it ends right here. Then Peter came up and said to him, "Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times?" I wonder what it would look like if we had a youth t-shirt with this sign on it, right? 70 times 7. And people say, what does that mean? 70 times 7. I love that graphic. But what you should do, I think, is you should have that graphic and then you should draw a line with equals and the word forgiveness underneath it. 70 times 7 equals forgiveness. Jesus said to him, "I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times." A perfect number. There isn't a limit to this. It is infinity. You forgive infinity. And when you look at that and you listen to how Jesus did it, especially like in John 8 with a woman caught in a very act of adultery, they bring her to him and he starts drawing on the sand. Whoever has no sin cast the first stone, and they disappear, the oldest to the youngest, and Jesus is drawing in the ground. He looks up, he says, "Where are those that are going to condemn you?" And she says, "Well, they've left." And he says, "Neither do I," what? "Neither do I judge you. Neither do I judge you." Go and sin no more. Our job isn't to judge. Our job is not to hold or make accusations. Our job is to let it go. And let me tell you what, the biggest problem we have with this are the details. You don't want to know the details. You really don't. You just want to know somebody saying, I have a problem in my life, I've messed up, I need the forgiveness of the church. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know the details. The details kind of gets you hooked back into it and gets you thinking about it. Jesus didn't want to know the details. It was terrible what those men did in any case, dragging her like that. But the first chance he had of saying anything is, go and sin no more. Neither do I judge you, go and sin no more. After the Civil War was over, we have this book written by Charles Flood on the last years of Lee. And he reports a situation where Lee is traveling through Kentucky, and he comes across this lady in Kentucky, and she's very, very upset. And she shows him the remains of a grand old tree that was just in the front of a house, the most beautiful tree you can imagine. And all the branches and the limbs have been, and most of the tree is shot away by artillery from the federal artillery fire. And this is what Lee says to her: cut it down, my dear madame, and forget it. Very, very good advice. The roots of unforgiveness become the bitterest things possible for the human soul. You need to get it, make it go away. Just cut it down. Make as if it had never even been there. Earlier on this week, Doreen pointed out, or a couple of days ago, we have a tree fallen in the backyard. And I didn't quite believe her, but this morning I looked out and there it was. And I can't wait to take my little saw and cut it to pieces and just make it disappear like it had never even been there. You don't want to hold on to these things. They just look ugly after a while. Number 3, forgiveness parable is application. And this is the last part of our lesson. And so we're going to go real quickly because you're all familiar with it. This king is going to leave, and he's going to sell everything up, and he's going to make equal out all his debts. And so he has all his debtors come in one by one, and one guy comes in who owes him this incredible amount of money. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. 10,000 talents. 10,000 talents. You can never, ever pay this amount back. When he began to settle, this is a million average working day salary, 1 million working days. This is what it equals out to. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment be made. But this guy falls down and he begs, he implores him, have patience with me and I will pay you everything. And so the king takes pity on him, the master takes pity on him, and he says to him, I forgive you your debt. This guy goes out and he finds somebody that owes a debt against him, and what does he do? 100 denarii, 1 million times less than what he owes. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. He seizes him and he chokes him, much worse than what that king had did to him. So his fellow servants fell down. The fellow servant fell down, pleaded patience, and he said exactly the same thing. Have patience with me and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. Then the king's servants see this. They're very, very upset, as they should be. They go and report back to their master what had taken place. Verse 32, and the master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? Forget about these words like there. Think about these words like this. We've just explained to you how you can achieve forgiveness. Go one time, just you and the person. Don't talk about it to anyone else. Go twice. This time, take 1 or 2 witnesses with you. Number 3, take it to the church, right? That's the explanation. Then exemplified it. Peter said, well, what about 7 times, Lord? No, infinity, 70 times 7. And then he tells this story. So the story is this. Is there anyone you can't forgive? This is your story. If there's anyone you can't forgive, this is your story. This is the last words that will ever be spoken about your life. If you've got a really, really good memory, you struggle with this. And I pray that you would be able to find it, because this is your strength, but it's also your weakness. You have to learn to let it go. My advice to somebody with a good memory is let it go as soon as possible. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I have had mercy on you? I was working with somebody recently who has this problem, and I had a template I was using to gauge anger for a letter I had to write to a judge. And there was all these different things. 0, you have no problem. Number 3, you get so angry, you want to strangle the person. And this person said, on one question, said 4. And it was this: if you're driving down the highway in a 45-mile zone, and there's somebody in front of you going 25 miles an hour, and you can't pass that person, what will you do? And so we went through all the thing on how what you think affects how you feel, affects how you act. So how you think about a situation. Either you think about somebody's doing that, or whatever causes you to really, really get into a state of unforgiveness. Take that and apply one of 3 emotions to it: faith, hope, and love, or fear, guilt, and anger. Depending on what you apply, God's 3 or the devil's 3 is going to depend on what action you're going to take. So what do you want to have? Compassion? You're driving behind somebody who's going 25 miles an hour, and the emotion you have at that point is compassion. What is your head going to be thinking? Well, maybe they just had a stroke. Maybe they just had a heart attack, experiencing chest pains. Maybe they were in a car wreck a couple of days ago, and they're traumatized from that car wreck, and this is the first time they're back on the road. I don't know what it is, but if I think with compassion, I think a lot differently than if I think with anger. Let it go. Find a way to get around it. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? What would it be like if God looks at you with anger, as opposed to if God looks at you with love? See, this is the way. You want him to love you. You want him to have mercy on you. You've got to turn around and have the same. And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to you, to every one of you, if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. I love this picture of this little girl covered with mud. It reminds me of the point I got a real conversion in my life. I was busy watching the Jewel Miller film strips, and I think it was the 3rd or the 4th one. And they have a picture there on this film strip of a guy with dirty hands. And the idea was, that's what your sins look like, to God. He can take us, no matter how bad we are, and he can make us whiter than snow. It also reminds me of a guy who used to make soap. And he walked up to a preacher one day and said, I don't believe in what you do. I think you are wasting energy. I think you're wasting oxygen. You shouldn't even be breathing oxygen, because Christianity has done nothing good for the world. And the preacher said, oh, and they kept walking. They came across somebody who was very dirty. And the preacher turned to the soap maker and said, I don't agree with your project. I think it's a big waste. I don't think it does any good. I think you're wasting oxygen breathing. And the guy said, why? He said, because you make soap, but look how dirty this little girl is here. And he said, well, it has to be applied. It has to be applied. The soap has to be applied to have any good. And so also, forgiveness has to be applied. And as I said this morning during the lesson, it was ironic when I saw the invitation song was going to be only a step. And maybe that's all it takes. Maybe all you can do when it comes to forgiving somebody who's really hurt you or one of your loved ones, which sometimes is a lot worse, is only a step. But maybe the person you need to forgive today is yourself. Why don't you consider doing that? If you want to be baptized, or you want to have the prayers of the church, or experience that forgiveness that we've been talking about, please come forward right now as together we stand and sing.